how we use it, and how people can be comfortable with that, and how to explain that to them. I guess all the things regarding that. So, yeah, first, what do you, so when you mention spirituality in medicine, what exactly do you mean by that?
Just a recognition of an individual's higher self, higher consciousness, some sort of experience external of their physical self, um, sort of what in their perception of things. So, um, not necessarily um, exclusively something that they use as a determinant for ideas about morality or
Hmm.
rightness or an ethic, but it can influence it, but it's not necessarily a meter. Um, a lot of how we perceive fairness, pain, um, how we relate to other people comes from these ideas of the spiritual self, or the self that sort of contextualizes our existence, not just our sensory self or sensual self.
Okay. So this could also get into like Freudian type stuff, um as far as like the mind, or like the ego, or things like that as well.
It could. I mean, the mind more is how sort of compartmentalize and make sense and reconcile with things of the sensory self. Um, it kind of creates sets of rules and ideas, um, and how you navigate people and situations and environments and even yourself. And so it's not the mind can have an impact on that, and sometimes they work together. A lot of times they don't.
Okay.
Then we have problems.
Okay.
But yeah, it's really, if you were explaining it to people, um, I think it's important to sort of normalize, sort of sifting these ideas that they're the same, and how much each of these ideas contribute to a whole person, especially when it comes to to medicine, I think.
Hmm. And what impact does that have on medicine, or treatment? Recognizing those things.
Well, I think a lot of I personally believe, and there's science behind this. um a large part of the healing process is here, and not just the mental of it. It's the belief in this, the spiritual belief of healing.
Hmm.
Meaning, because when they work together, they have the power to reconfigure not just your physical experience in terms of your sensory experience, but also the actual physicality of where there is disease. And
Hmm.
so, if you have a better idea, or even forget understanding, if you have a respect, when you can look at someone and respect their spiritual self, you can better treat them. It's no different than learning any other language or how to better relate to someone, um, and not from, yes, starting from a universal idea of it, but then taking the time to understand their own spiritual beliefs, their individual spiritual beliefs.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean that seems to me also. I mean, like someone's like emotional state, or or even like their stress levels, or their belief that they can get better, will affect their treatment as well, right?
Well, yeah. So, stress, yes, which is psychological.
Mhm.
Um, stress can sort of be grounded in the spiritual self too. It can impact that, but that's a psychological phenomena that has a physiological sort of manifestation. So, I'm experiencing distress because there's some discord between what I believe to be true and what I'm experiencing, or what I would like to be true and what I'm experiencing. And so now I'm struggling with it and it's causing me stress, psychological stress, you know, and then emotional discomfort, which easily causes physical discomfort. So your spiritual self, in terms of coping with these things or reconciling them, um, I guess you can say blows the whistle. Um, uh, so it would kind of be, yeah, it'd be the referee if I were to sort of make some sort of analogy out of it all. Um, it wouldn't hold the same weight in that type of fight as the other three. Um,
Okay.
so, and which to me is another reason to have a good, forget grasp, to have an understanding
Mhm.
that there is a spiritual self that exists out externally of those sort of dynamics.
And would that include things like a sense of purpose and like happiness, drive, like things like that? Would you explain that that way?
Those can be rooted. That's basic. Those are individualistic ideas. Some people's ideas about purpose are rooted in the spiritual self. Others are not. Those can be very 3D sensory things that are rooted in the material self. That if I have these things, I'm successful. If I have this relationship, with a person, I'm successful. If I have this particular job or whatever, I am successful. If I accomplish this particular goal, I'm successful. Those are all 3D things that are material sensory experiences.
Right.
Sometimes they carry spiritual meaning to some people. Mostly those are like societal constructs, to some degree, things we've arrived at understanding as success or satisfaction or gratification. Um, but those things could also be found in a spiritual context, but more than likely they're materially different than other ideas that we might find, ideas about happiness or success in. Not all the time.
Mhm. That's
Some
interesting to me because when I think of purpose, I don't really think of material things, but that just shows that that word can mean different things, either to different people or different situations. But when I think of like drive and purpose, like let's say
Mhm.
someone is maybe an activist and they want to better their community and they feel a sense of purpose, standing up for people or advocating for people, that might have a spiritual connection that's different than say getting the next promotion or getting the house or the car or things like that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and again, my rationale is that those are individualistic ideas.
Hmm.
Um, and so when you're looking at purpose, personal ideas of purpose, they can be derived from anywhere. Some people's sense of purpose is rooted in external relationships that they feel validate their personhood.
Hmm.
So I'm a mom. How am I a mom? I'm a mom because of someone or something external of myself exists in relation to me that gives me that definition. So if I find purpose in being a mom, which I'm not, um, that's still external. Now
Okay.
I could find spiritual motivations in these external validations. I could find that. I could rationalize that in my spiritual self. I could say that, me playing this role as a mother, sort of gives me a greater meaning as to why I'm here, right? Um,
Okay.
and I could rationalize that in some
Okay.
greater, but it's still very much rooted in something external, just like your job or a job as an
Mhm.
activist. That could be very helpful. It doesn't say it's bad because
Okay. So if we were to say, so I think I'm kind of getting what you're getting at as far as a spiritual being an internal rather than an external thing, right? Is that what you're getting at? Whoops, I got you
usual.
freezing up a little bit.
But we could even take it. Let's take it to a point of when we do have a materiality connected to a spiritual purpose or motivation. Let's say you're an artist and you create music, or you create like visual art or film or whatever, and you feel that your creation of this art is spiritually informed, like you had a revelation and you did this thing, right? Or you sang this piece or composed this piece, right? um it doesn't make it any more or less spiritual by the number of people impacted by that act than someone who says, well, my spiritual motivation or calling is to be a mom. It's all relative, or to be an activist or a social worker, right? It doesn't diminish anything or make it less, more or less spiritual. Even the gradients of that, or the grading it, makes it very materially grounded. It's that's external.
Mhm.
It's all about these intrinsic ideas, and rationalizing that with a higher self. The process of that rationalization, I think, is exclusive to the spiritual self. How do we grapple with that? Where does that toolbox live?
Okay. So the internal component, like let's say the calling itself, may be the more spiritual element, and then that has external manifestations that you might use to maybe judge, where you are on your journey or your process or something like that, right?
Right, 9 times out of 10, and it doesn't mean it's noticeably, manifested by others, but
Hmm.
Um, so I think that's a really good way of putting it. 9 times out of 10, you're gonna see some fruit
Right,
from a that's a fruit tree. So
right. So it's kind of like is that similar to like a faith and works kind of thing? Is that like a similar
faith.
analogy?
Um, I wouldn't. My knee jerk is to say no, only because faith comes with a certain type of expectation of materiality, external expectation. I think, where you're fully reckoning that there are elements of this that are outside of your control, whereas when you're operating in these ideas of creating something that's exclusively dependent on you, you have a different type of responsibility for making it happen. And so, and that's the only like caveat I would have, where I think that those things are like different.
Right. Assuming that we're talking about faith and something or someone outside of yourself, right?
Hmm.
Outside of yourself or your higher self.
Hmm.
Okay. Good. I wanted to wrestle with that, and I wanted to see where that could take us,
Hmm.
for sure.
Hmm.
Um, so so all in all, like, what do you think about the current state of medicine in America, or like the health, you know. Yeah, I guess we can just start there with like medicine or a system in America.
Oh my gosh. Someone on social media, um, Thursday, maybe Friday, put up the funniest post about the aliens doing an interview with another alien about their time in America
Hmm.
and how much they hate it. And it was all based on the healthcare system. I think one of them got hurt and they went to the hospital and the hospital turned him away and he was like fatally wounded. The
Hmm.
hospital the hospital turned him away because he didn't have any money. And he was explaining to the other aliens why they do that because no one could understand it. And that
Wow.
was so brilliant.
Yeah.
Um, because normally we like to do that in comparison to other countries,
Right.
and so to have someone from another planet be like, "What the hell is wrong with them?" You
Yeah.
know that that was brilliant. I think that nailed it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. People have been coming up with a lot of funny memes since the I don't know the person who's being interviewed, but I guess there's a person being interviewed by senators or what have you about some contact um, with aliens, and some people are concerned about different things. Like AOC is like, so where's this money going? Who's accountable? Thinking about other things that the money could be spent on and whatnot. And then some people just want to know what's going on. But another meme I saw was like some threat by like an alien to destroy the planet or something, and then someone's like, "Oh, we're doing that already." And then there's like another thing that's like funny but not funny. But I actually thought of like healthcare and things like that. Other ways that we're not taking care of ourselves that you think maybe an outside threat would like be able to threaten you with.
right, and it's I've said this before, but that sketch said it all. If you were to judge us by how we treat the most vulnerable among us, healthcare
Hmm.
side, we look at like elderly, our education system, and of course healthcare, food access. We don't like each other. Like,
Yeah. Well, see, it's funny. It's funny mentioning aliens in this conversation because myself as like a vegan, I think may have been Gandhi who had a quote about a nation being judged by how it treats its most vulnerable, and like I put animals in that category as well, and sometimes it's difficult because I think there's this. There's this perception that vegans are this or vegans are that, or they'll always tell you that they're vegan, or they'll beat you over the head with it. But it's my experience that a lot of vegans are pretty mellow, and they don't really stand up for this thing that they believe in, and it is kind of a personal thing. But like looking at situations with what happened with the football player that was found abusing the dogs years ago.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't even remember that
I'm
guy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm having a brain fart, so I'm forgetting his name. But like, it was a big uproar, right? Because he's like fighting these pit bulls and they're putting them down and things like that. But I'm sitting back as a vegan and I'm like, the average person that's criticizing him for this is like going to McDonald's or going to the store and they're literally purchasing meat where this animal was like tortured for its entire existence, never got to run around, never got to have family time or do anything. And they're supporting this thing like every single day. They're just not making a spectacle of it where they're, watching dog fights in backyards, but it's a much bigger operation. And, I kind of wonder when we'll start to come to terms with that because it's one of these things like, people don't like to think about big things like our cell phone, like how many kids are being abused for the metal parts in our cell phones or our Nikes or you may have heard of Killer Coke and how they were like killing like union people and stuff like that in other countries getting away with it. But it's like eventually, slowly but surely, we start to chip away at some of these things that have just been a part of our society and take it for granted. Like now, people are starting to turn against SeaWorld, right? I had a conversation with a supervisor who was talking about what pet to get his kid, and he talked about fish. And, in a nice, non condescending, non like, holier than thou way, I just kind of like talked about, like, think about how many miles fish get to swim. And then we as humans decide to put them in this small bowl where they can just go around and around. Even if it's an aquarium, it's still like a small cage. And then we come up with justifications like, oh, well, goldfish have short memories. And it's like, well, there's more to there's more to moving around in life than memories.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's easy for us to have a disconnect with all these systems because by nature we're not just supposed to be consumers in the system. There's an active role we're supposed to play, um, even as omnivores in the system that would force us to reconcile with the methodology and how we do it.
Right. Yeah,
If
for sure.
we become and there are many other world cultures that that did that, but the more we became mechanized and removed from that, um, our sort of conscientiousness of it went with that
Yeah.
to the point where a burger's a burger. A
Right.
burger is not some cow you were engaged with for several years,
Right.
um, or some bull rather. You were engaged with for several years, near your home. You
And
watch.
I think you're right when you said cow. I think you're right. Yeah.
Pardon?
I said I think you were right when you said cow.
Oh,
Burgers, cows. Yeah.
um, you know, um, because not many of us live near farms, and not many of us have had a direct experience with a farm or the the alive version of the things that we like to eat. Very, very rarely.
Yeah.
It you can't have that sort of contact with the living thing that you consume and then be the same.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the consumer aspect of it has definitely it's become so commercialized, and it's just on another scale. Like even fishing isn't this small scale thing anymore. They're actually fishing at a scale that's like destroying, entire ecosystems,
Yeah.
with the trawling, and they're just overdoing it to the point. I mean, the same thing we did when we, destroyed a lot of the animals that indigenous people, counted on when we came through and slaughtered them at amazing in amazing quantities. I guess why I kind of went in that direction is thinking about aliens and thinking about some of the futuristic things that I watch, like on Star Trek. They don't eat animals anymore. They have like maybe a replicator if they want to eat something that reminds them of an animal or something like that. So I always think about like the future and where we're going, and what it takes for people to think about things a little bit differently. Every once in a while, something moves the needle, like the What the Health documentary. Even my cousins who used to make fun of me for being the only vegan they knew, some of them went plant based for a while after seeing What the Health, and I was like shocked that one documentary could have that impact. I don't think any of them are doing that anymore, but still had an impact, made them think, made them pause, and at least try something for a little bit. Um, and crap, I forgot what I was going to say. Um,
We were talking about aliens and lab grown
oh,
protein.
yeah. Well, I was just thinking of Atlanta. Atlanta is an interesting city because there's so many black vegans there that it's like different from what people are used to. Because people always like subscribe and give so much credit to white people, like as if they invented veganism or all these other things. So it's always good to see communities where people who look like us are doing something different and compassionate, and they're not just a slave to old traditions and systems. They're not afraid to like break patterns, especially with our folks having some of the health issues that we have, and some of us still holding on traditions that came from slavery, as far as foods and things like that. But yeah, to me, Atlanta's a great example of that. Almost futuristic in that sense, at least from the social sense. Like I think of it as maybe the closest thing we have to like a Wakanda or something like that. The fact that we're futuristic down there. And then the number one greatest group uh, within veganism that's growing the greatest is Black women. So
Yeah.
yeah, I find that to be interesting.
Well, a lot of heavy meat consumption is it's still a very gendered behavior,
Mhm.
um, especially when it comes to red meat. Um, Steak is very male, um,
Okay.
in American culture. So, and also a lot of when you're looking at meat consumption with Black women under a certain age, who deal disproportionately with reproductive health issues, a
Mhm.
large part in the first step now is being more broadly recommended than before are diet changes, and the first thing they would encourage you to do. With not just reproductive health, but also cardiovascular health, with Black women leading in the highest cases, you'll see these diet changes as a first round of intervention on how to take back control of these things preventively, or as part of a holistic treatment for these.
What is that diet change recommendation? Anything in particular or just in general?
Well, for both, but let's just, since I mentioned reproductive health first, um, a plant forward diet, not necessarily exclusively plant based,
Hmm.
where and also a dairy free
Interesting.
diet where you can control the number of hormones that you're consuming.
And
Um,
this is like mainstream doctors that are recommending this?
I'm finding more mainstream doctors are recommending it.
That's
Um,
good.
it's great. Um, and also, I've had younger women, report symptomatic changes from like a lot of menopause. Excuse me, some menstrual disorders they were having, like horrible periods,
Hmm.
or uterine cysts, or extremely heavy bleeding, PCS, and they're trying. These younger girls are trying diet changes first, and it's being recommended by their doctors.
Yeah.
It's since you'll have more young girls who'll be like, you know what, I don't want the hormone based birth control.
Hmm.
How else can I treat this? And I think that's fantastic for them to give it a try.
Yeah.
Um, and so some of it's coming from that. Younger women have more autonomy over their diets,
Right.
um, in a different way too. And so Black women. So that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. I was talking with someone the other day. It just kind of came up, and I just had this memory of how when I was young, I used to have these horrible sinus infections every year, where I just like couldn't breathe through my nose, and I would just try to keep blowing my nose, and it was just horrible. And I remember at one point my father telling me that I should stop all the dairy because I'm always like eating cereal and drinking milk and stuff like that. And so lo and behold, years later when I became a vegan, and that wasn't his point, was to go vegan, but I just kind of circled back to that memory, and lo and behold, I stopped having those horrible sinus infections.
Yep. Yep. I mean, and dairy isn't the only food that causes excess mucus buildup in the body.
Mhm.
Um, and so,
What are the
yeah,
other what are the other things?
basically eating fewer alkaline foods.
Ah, I
Um,
see. I see.
yeah, when you have tend to have a more acidic diet,
Mhm.
um, your body tends to generate more mucus because it's protective, essentially. And
Okay.
so, and that's not across the board for all, Black and brown people or all people.
Mhm.
It's how your particular body metabolizes these things, or the other things that you're doing that might be affecting it. So some of it is behavioral too, and also how your body tolerates emotional environmental stressors.
Hmm.
Um, all those things could like throw you off into some sort of inflammation, and so you need like a really good holistic snapshot.
Right. And then there's people who live in areas where there's like lots of traffic, and a lot of black and brown people live in areas where, you know, they built highways and stuff like that,
Oh,
that affect the asthma rates and stuff too.
oh yeah, oh yeah.
Now, does milk fall outside of the acid alkaline discussion? Is that its own separate thing, or is that?
It's a mucus producing food. Dairy is a mucus producing food, but it
Yeah.
falls outside the scope of that particular argument.
Yeah.
That but so it's categorized as its own thing as a mucus producing food.
Gotcha. Cool.
But I mean, it's not for some of us. It's not gonna like I eat dairy, I drink milk, not like an incredible amount.
Hmm.
Most milk that I consume is plant and seed based,
Okay.
but yeah, I drink milk and eat ice cream and cheese and yogurt. I do plenty of yogurt.
Okay.
Yeah,
Milk based, you mean, not the
shade
the
from cow.
other kind? Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm. Speaking of air quality, how's the air quality in New York right now?
Today's not bad.
Okay. So is it a day-to-day thing? Is it like?
At one point it was
Mhm.
like lately I haven't had any trouble, at all, and I haven't gotten any alerts. Even when it was much hotter. Today is very mild compared to like a couple days ago.
Yeah.
But it's mostly dependent on the wind that was coming in from the wildfires.
Yeah.
So the heat index plays a huge part of it.
Right.
Yeah, it was a perfect storm for all these things to happen.
Sure. Do they
Hmm.
have an expectation on that how long that's going to be an issue? And are the fires still burning, or what's the deal?
I don't know. And to answer your first question, as of the last time I checked, which was honestly outside of the daily index reports,
Yeah.
um, no, they had no idea as of like a week and a half ago. But
Okay. So it could be months, it could be weeks, it could be
right, and
a
I could
year or two, or
well, and I could very well be wrong as of now. Um, but uh, it hasn't been like a real problem in quite some time. So it's a
okay.
big.
Okay. Yeah, I hate to wonder or to, fall into alarm, but it's like when we think of these things from weeks to months to years, I mean, we never thought we would still be here with COVID. And I still have members of work who are falling ill to COVID. It's like still very much a thing. Sometimes I wonder if, we've gotten too relaxed, or if it's just a new norm or something that,
Oh
is going
yeah.
to happen. People are maybe hopefully a little bit more equipped physically to handle it at this
Oh,
time.
oh, Mercils are like stripper glitter. Like that's it. They're not. It's not going anywhere. You're not cleaning it up.
Hmm.
So you got it on you. You're welcome. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's just going to continue to do what diseases do. They mutate to stay alive. So you know,
So you think there's no getting rid of this COVID? It's just a new thing that we have to deal with now.
It is, and you know what? As awful and as horrible as it was, and we both know that it did not have to get that way.
Yeah,
Um, it it could have been far worse,
right.
so worse. I don't think people realize that either.
Yeah,
That that the speed that the vaccines got out, the way when we finally did get protocol in place that was legit,
yeah,
um, and then the lockdowns one after the other.
yeah,
Thank God. I
yeah.
mean,
I'm just disappointed in the way that, like, not to call out certain states, but we saw Florida partying and stuff like that. And I'm not going to mention any names. I know someone who's lucky enough never to get it, but he was you know, out there doing his thing too. Um, but yeah, it's just one of those things where I guess, when you have a division of states, unless you have someone who's really ready to take the lead and say, no, we got to do this, you leave it up to to whoever happens to be the governor of whatever kind of state that they're
right,
running.
right,
So there's that, and of course there's still travel. So there's spreading and super spreader events. But the other thing that I was disappointed about was, like, and this is kind of human nature, which is why sometimes we have to depend on people who are wiser than ourselves, like, especially as Americans. And I know people in some other countries like to do this, but we think there's a common sense approach to everything. And it's like, no, maybe the nerds who went to school and didn't play outside and do nothing but examine this granular stuff that's very, very difficult for the average mind to understand.
right.
Maybe, we should be listening to them. So it's like things get a little bit better and everyone runs back outside again. And I'm like, we've seen this cycle before. Like, why don't we practice super precaution and risk staying inside even well past, when it's really blown over, instead of getting excited when the sniffles are gone and then resubjecting ourselves to the worst, which is what seemed to happen a lot.
That is what happened. And what it should have been, and obviously it wasn't considering the latest news on our favorite state. Um it should have been a sign about, the condition of leadership in these respective states from jump.
Yeah.
It's
Well, sometimes the old leaving it up to the states is the worst
it was
idea,
it
right?
was it was almost as worse as disbanding, our health research right before a pandemic hit. But
Oh, yeah.
and disjoining the WHO. But
Right.
still mind blowing. But
Yeah,
it's like,
for sure.
how every block has that one house whose the parents just let the kids do whatever,
Right.
and it's like your parents are like, you can't play in their house. They
Yeah.
can maybe come over here outside, but not come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, for those states,
Oh,
and
yeah.
like, so you watch those kids grow up. You're like, mm-hmm. you you kind of know what's gonna happen the next until they're 21. So
Yeah. It reminds me of that scene in Boys in the Hood where,
right,
Furious Styles is very strict with his son, and he's like, "You're gonna see how they grow up," and then, next thing you know, we all know how the story goes.
and here we are, less than 3 years later, burning books, calling slavery a mild inconvenience. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like,
Well,
yeah, it's like reading a really bad book.
yeah. Well, speaking of reading books, it's kind of like, for someone who probably doesn't read books, Kanye definitely helped, write some of the forwards on these books
Oh,
with his "Slavery Was a Choice" thing.
I can't even just I cannot, I simply cannot.
Yeah.
It, that everything comes from somewhere, and when it comes to sensationalizing things in the media, it's like pushing dominoes. There'll be someone who sets them up, So by the time we have a good wind or just one person with a flick, they fall down very nicely.
Yeah.
And I think that because we take media for advantage so much, I think we forget that's how those things work.
Right.
That these aren't singular things. There were most of these dynamics we see playing out socially, well now politically, that are really gravely affecting us as Black people. You know, somebody lined up those dominoes, and sometimes it was us. You know,
Right.
skin.
Yeah.
You know, so and when these people were doing it, we had a lot to say, but it was more in terms of us. I think it was more in terms of seeing like the short term of it, like you jackass, instead.
Right.
Hey, you're dangerous.
Right.
Those ideologies line up for a whole bunch of other things that happen very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a good point. Yeah,
Yeah,
we always gotta take the long view of these things as well,
we can't.
because that's what the ops are doing, and they've done it extremely and deviously well,
Yeah, we can't afford not to.
for sure.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, this has been another good discussion. Unless you have anything else to say, I think that's a good place to leave it. I like where we started and where we ended up with this one.
Yeah, me too. As always, you know,
Yep,
it's
yep. And
interesting.
I'll post this one sooner than later, especially now. I know how to put it up on the YouTube and everything too, so that's good.
Awesome, cool. I'll be looking forward to it.
All right, everybody, like and subscribe and share the F Designer YouTube page. Flavius Activus Maximus. Thank you, Sheika.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. You have a good one.
All right, have a good one. Peace.